A very warm welcome. You're joining us at Hyde Park on Ada Derana 24. And tonight we thought of talking about the IT industry, going global, where Sri Lanka stands and what it means for investors to move into Sri Lanka. Of course, the country aims to generate some $5 billion in revenue from the IT BPM industry, create 200,000 jobs and establish 1,000 IT business process management startups within the island. I thought of talking to a top business person who is visiting in Sri Lanka, a businesswoman, an IT person who's been traveling the world, who's also in Sri Lanka with the company's startup and its business ventures here in Sri Lanka, with the new developments in the IT industry and tax breaks given to the country. We've invited to our studios HCL Technologies Corporate Vice President Srimathi Shivashankar. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, and this is indeed a great opportunity to interact with you and also discuss about the investment and the IT climate in the country. Ayubawan, Sri Lanka.
Ayubawan to you. Computer science engineer turned businesswoman. You've been awarded recently by Wall Street Journal, a jury drawn by top Fortune 100 companies too. Right. This is amazing. A businesswoman from the region, where we're very proud of you. It's very nice to have you here in our studios. A distinguished alumni of the top 10 engineering schools in India, universities in India. Tell us about your journey from engineering to IT business.
I'm one of the first generation computer science engineers from India. Mm-hmm. I started my career in coding and more on engineering services. Then later I moved into techno-commercial area and pursued my higher education in the US mm-hmm. with an MBA. I think the first opportunity post my MBA was more on business, and then thereafter my journey just continued, a combination of tech and business. I think it's quite a deadly combination because what is most important to run business is human capital. Mm-hmm. So somewhere in the early 2000s, I started to focus a little more on human capital plus business strategy, and there's no looking back last 20 years.
HCL, an IT giant present globally, has expanded into Sri Lanka. And since the 2020 budget announcement, we see your presence here in Sri Lanka. What makes Sri Lanka so attractive for a global IT giant as HCL?
The success behind any technology industry is the kind of people that we onboard. We see the young talent in Sri Lanka as one of the best bets that we can look at. Besides, the way the schools have started focusing on STEM education in the country gives us a very good opportunity to get the youth of Sri Lanka to join an organization like ours. So talent has been the foremost reason as to why we are here.
What are your plans here now when we say HCL entered Sri Lanka back in 2020, at the beginning of November, if I'm not mistaken? Right. We see that Sri Lanka also announced massive tax breaks for the industry with the new budget announced last year. Right. But at the same time, HCL is present heavily in other parts of the world as well. Are you moving your ventures out of certain countries, or are these new ventures?
Today we operate in more than 45, 46 countries. So wherever we do believe that we have a good offshoring expertise, especially from the talent perspective, and we see that there is a proper infrastructure and the government support, we are happy to go and set our operation. So Sri Lanka is one of those significant countries that we see in the next 3 to 5 years growing. Like we have said in the past, so somewhere in 2020, around the September, we started our operations. We're actually 1 year old, and we have crossed the 1,000 employee headcount here. So that's just has set the right expectations within the organization about the kind of talent you can get here. So the focus is to grow anyway from 3,000 to 5,000 employees. So the tax breaks and other incentives alone cannot push a tech company to grow. It's more about the backward integration part, the quality of engineering schools, the quality of other talent, and the aspirations of the youth to embrace technology. I think these are very, very key factors for expansion.
You said 1,000 employees to date, 1 year since setting up in Sri Lanka. But what are your targets going forward? What kind of a contribution does HCL aim to make to the Sri Lankan economy going forward?
See, fortunately, business coming in is not a problem. We have a good demand in terms of delivering business from, from Colombo. So usually people are concerned about what will be the growth.
Right.
Fortunately, growth is not the problem. But how we need to get the talent is still, on the supply side. So the planning is more on the supply side rather than the demand side for us. So we are looking anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 people getting added in the next three to 4 years or so.
So does that mean you have about 4,000 more opportunities, job opportunities for the Sri Lankan youth? Going forward, I'd like to stress a little about the revenue generation and the kind of business, the expansion that you expect to make here in Sri Lanka. We know you have a massive operation there in India, based in India. Have you shifted here? Have you shifted to Sri Lanka, or are you spread across our part of the region? How does this the economy, if it all, look?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question. So I like to answer this in two parts. The first one is that many people think that we have moved our back office operations here and we are servicing India from here, which means that it's just more like a captive of HCL operating from Sri Lanka, which is not true. What we are doing as a business and IT development and delivery from Sri Lanka, it's very similar to what we do in India. So which means it's just a mirror image of what we do there, and we are servicing our Fortune 500 customers and the next 2,000 companies only from Sri Lanka. So it's a direct delivery, and there is nothing like we are trying to service our other businesses in India. Because many times when I have my other business peers in Sri Lanka talk to me, they think I'm running my captive here, so which is not true. And therefore, since the opportunity is to service the clients directly from here, and I know the standard of the talent is extremely good and in par with most of the other global centers where we operate from, I do not see any issue in our growth, right? And therefore, the 3,000, 4,000 that we are talking about is definitely coming in our way.
You focus on human capital, talent, youth talent. You speak about talent here in Sri Lanka. What parameters do you all set in the recruitment process? How do you identify the kind of talent that you want in order to absorb to your venture here?
Though IT is not new to Sri Lanka, and there are companies and operations which have been around for the past 20 years. Unfortunately, we do not have experienced talent in the new age technologies, be it digital or be it some of those what we would call as engineering services, which are on the growth path at this point in time. So as we start taking the talent, the only way to accelerate is hire and skill. So we will hire and we need to skill them for the jobs. So people may come in with certain level of technical competencies, but we need to invest in them for their job proficiencies. So HCL is extremely competent in doing that. And that's how we've been growing across all countries, including India. Even if you look at the talent in India, people may say, oh, they must be ready to be deployed immediately in the projects. It's not so. Starting from the freshers to the senior hire that we get in, we do invest a bit in skilling.
Talking about education, well, I'd like to talk. I'd like to see what you think about education here in Sri Lanka, especially IT professionals in training and nurturing IT professionals and sending them out into the work environment. In terms of the universities and the education we have here, on par with global standards, what do you think is Sri Lanka's capacity here?
We started off this conversation with talking about the aspirations to grow into a 5 billion exports from the country, which means that we do need the right talent coming in at the right time. I see there is a huge gap between the supply and demand, and if the schools do not start pushing more STEM education at the O and the A levels, and thereafter the college is also trying to open gates to absorb more freshers, this will be a concern, right? So the bottleneck is also there pretty much in the entry levels as well, right? And number two is I see some similarities between Sri Lanka and certain other countries 10 years back, when there were quite a bit of brain drain, people just leaving the country for other aspirations. I just hope that collectively in this country, HCL and other companies, we are able to show the career path so that we are able to retain mature talent. If there is no experienced talent getting retained in the country, then the growth will always be a concern. So on one end, we need to attract. The second is we need to retain with good career path.
1,000 jobs created so far. You aim to create 4,000 more, which will be about 5,000 jobs here as direct employment creation as part of HCL's venture here in Sri Lanka. In terms of the business expansion, where do you plan to be? What kind of operations? How big will it be here in Sri Lanka?
Currently, our focus is going to be largely only Colombo because we see that the infrastructure available in Colombo, access to talent, and also the young talent, little urbanish, still want an after office life, right? So keeping all this, we are focusing largely on in Colombo only at this point in time.
I'd like to move on to talk a little about the investment climate here in Sri Lanka. Yes, we did speak about how HCL moved into Sri Lanka in September 2020, a year ago, with the budget's tax incentives and new breaks offered to the IT industry. But in terms of the current environment, what challenges do you see for incoming investments or IT sector players? Challenges, by what I mean, how do you think Sri Lanka could work on these areas in order to enable more investments into the country?
HCL came into Sri Lanka with the help of Board of Investment, which has been set to attract investors like us. One thing very interesting and significant milestone that we have had is the way that we've been able to collaborate with the BOI and the commitment they had done in terms of a single window clearance.
Right.
So, many countries talk about single window, but the concept of single window can be really, really, going from one window to another window, saying it's single window. But fortunately here we do have a single window clearance. So there is a specific task force that is available for investors like us to kind of, understand the nuances of setting up the company. So I think there is a sense of purpose and agility in the way that the investments are sought here. And besides, we also find that wherever we are caught, wherever we do have concerns, there are the right people to support us.
What's HCL's outlook on the IT, information technology and business process management industry here in Sri Lanka on par with global standards, and the outlook, given the situation of a pandemic ongoing, challenges put before us as a result of the pandemic? What's the outlook for the entire industry?
Pandemic is a great inflection point to take a deeper insight as to what the industry has to do. Are we going for a big bets, or are we just going to be staying small? In my view, I think we should go more digital, more into engineering services, and show the world that there is a value add that can be given. So we may be constrained in the head count, the number of people who will be available, but I think we must look at the high-tech business in the coming years. Digital is going to be the next 20 years is nothing but the digital world. So I'm very confident if Sri Lanka can take one step forward and start looking at how you want to build capacity for the high-tech business, there's no looking back.
Well, it's time we take a short commercial break here at Hyde Park. We're in conversation with Srimathi Shivashankar, Corporate Vice President of HCL Technologies based in India and expanding across the world. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back. We are in conversation with Srimathi Shivashankar, a computer science engineer turned information technology businesswoman who's quite influential at HCL, the corporate vice president. Tell us a little about your work. What does it entail? Of course, we know you travel across the world, but what is it really? Do you manage human capital? Do you strategize HCL's way forward?
So I head a business called the New Vistas, and which also includes setting up the captive centers and the captive businesses for HCL. So starting from figuring out what to do in the new locations and what kind of business to move, how to attract the right kind of customers, how to build the talent. So the business strategy, the finance strategy, the human capital strategy. So this is like setting up your own business, being an entrepreneur within HCL. So it's an amazing position because you get to build something and you operate something and then you grow as well. I run my own P&L in a simple way. I think that's where HCL stands apart as compared to many of the other IT organizations that you see from India. All the corporate offices, we run our own business. We are independent, still interdependent, and we run our own P&L. So we are empowered to take the right decisions and bring agility.
You love spending time with your family, I understand, but being in the industry for more than 20 years, what does it feel like? It's challenging, we all know as women. You've studied, I've gone through your profile from an MBA to you're a computer science engineer, and you've been working on IT, information technology. It wouldn't have been normal for someone to get into the industry some 20 years ago. What did it feel like? What kind of support did you have? And as a woman, how challenging was it for you to move up?
Yeah, I've been working for more than 25 years, fortunately. I think I always tell women, if you decide what you want to do, then stay put with it. If you believe that others should influence your life, then rest of the years in your life, someone is going to say what is right or what is wrong. And fortunately, the families has been very, very considerate. So unlike many of the other women, I didn't grow up in an urban city. I grew up in a small town. When you grow up in a small town, it's the way you become resilient at a young age gives you a lot more confidence when you want to break the barriers. So I'm very thankful that I grew up in a joint family, and which also believed that the girls are no different from boys.
Your family was supportive.
Very supportive.
You're fortunate.
Very supportive, and they just let me do what I believe was right. And they allowed me to explore the world through my own eyes. And so I do have a great partner and kids who thought that what will the mother do sitting at home? It's better she stays out and stay happy and still be with us.
That's wonderful. Going forward, I think there is a lot of concern, or maybe if I may put it as fear, about how the IT industry or the AI, artificial intelligence, will transform the way we engage with people, how businesses are run, how nations are operated. What is your outlook here? What does this mean? You're passionate about nurturing human capital, but will human capital be relevant with the development of AI?
You're right. I think one is the AI is going to also bring in new challenges, but the AI will also make the human capital to wanting to learn more and compete with the AI, right? So both are going to go hand in hand in the coming years. And that's why, I always tell the youngsters it's important to keep updated and learn every day, as much as the AI is trying to get itself updated every day, right? So if you look at the digital world in the next few years, we are going to be connected, starting from you getting into the elevator, going into your kitchen. You are going to stay connected, right? But while the AI might pick up the signals of getting connected, it's the human which needs to still decide what to be connected. So therefore, the human intelligence will always be there. I was having a conversation with my mom a couple of weeks ago, and I was just telling her, Amma, very soon you may have the robots coming into your kitchen, and they may do the precision cooking for you. And then she just laughed and said, suppose I give the robot an instruction that my husband needs a little salt, my daughter needs more salt. Will it understand? Will it be able to smell and tell me that this is the right consistency that my mother-in-law likes? Will it do all these things? And I said, that's a big question, but that's where the human mind has to decide and tell the AI, tell the robo, what little salt or more salt actually means, right? So people are not going to lose jobs because of automation. In fact, they're going to become much more intelligent because of automation.
That's a relief. But I'd like to come back to talk about human capital development here in Sri Lanka. You spoke about education. You spoke about the supply-demand gap here. Also, what more can we do in order to up this situation so that we meet the demand in terms of supply? Education, be it bringing in institutions, whether it's internationally recognized affiliations we need here, or we have some amazing local universities that produce the best talent to the rest of the world. We talk about brain drain, and some of the best brains were produced in Sri Lanka and are working outside. But in your view, how do we go about this?
Absolutely. I think the first and foremost where I see that there is a huge gap between how many A-level students are available to pursue their higher education and number of seats that are available even for pursuing higher education. I think that gap has to be taken care of first. If someone does not have access to quality education, coming at the right pricing, there will be a good drop, and then getting the youth to aspire for a continuing education will never come back. I just hope the government has the right policies to do so. Number two, there must be better industry-academia connect. I think companies like us, especially HCL, we are very ready to go back and start setting up incubation centers in the colleges for future technologies, and we should get that work started this year. And I do believe more and more of industry people going back and teaching in the schools so that there is an early on people can get in. Some of the countries like India have been very successful in putting a lot of people into STEM education. It's also because of funding was available for paying fees. So when people who cannot afford, the government was ready to give the loan at 0 interest. And people would pay only after they get the job, and that only after 1 year of them serving a company. So which means an engineering student for the first 5 years doesn't pay the interest or principal and then starts paying later. So unless there are some policies around getting the right resources to the students, it's going to be a challenge.
You've addressed international fora such as the UN, the World Economic Forum, Investment Forum rather, and several international fora. But when you talk at these global conferences and forums coming back to Sri Lanka, I'd like to see how not just Sri Lanka and the region, we talk about the SAARC and our part of the world, how can we collectively grow? We talk about the European economy, we speak about America, we speak about the East Asia, but when we talk about our region and when you speak at these global conferences and fora, how do you see the economy of these countries collectively in terms of bringing the IT industry together to benefit out of it?
The most fortunate thing about the Asian or the ASEAN countries is that the young workforce, the youth that we have in terms of quality and quantity, much higher than the European and the American nations put together. I think we really need to leverage this youth, what I would call as a Gen Millennial, in the right manner, number one. Number two is, I think we need to brand ourselves better. I think somehow we don't really speak about all the best things that are happening in our countries, in our curriculum, and the human intelligence and the competitiveness that we have. Most of us actually start positioning people who have left the country, saying that they belong in here, but we do not choose to recognize people who are doing extremely well in the country and giving them an opportunities to publish their patents and also build their prototypes when they come up with ideas. I think more and more as economies, we should just feed each other to go where the right talent is, see the right kind of capital, and nurture a lot more innovations. Every day, I'm sure in the country where I would call them having frugal economies, are the ones where innovation happens every day. I'm sure your dad, my dad, you and I, we are into constant innovation every day because there are always resource constraints. Wherever resource constraints are, we come up with some good innovation. But do we really build on to those innovation and make them happen is a question. So I would really look forward to the ASEAN economics focusing on jointly on something that would lead into path-breaking innovations every day.
Innovations, to spur innovations, to create that conducive environment. What do you think is expected of the next budget? We're talking about a budget in Sri Lanka as a company, and also if you move just beyond your corporate expectations, for a country to be able to create that kind of talent and support people, especially to reach out to big investments as yours. What were you expecting out of this budget?
I'm looking forward to having some budgets around creating centers of excellence. And I think the country should also focus on one or two areas where we believe that the focus should go. Once the country determines that the budgets will go for A, B, C kind of technologies or centers of excellence, and start talking more and more about it, you'll find right from the schools to colleges to the companies, we will start aligning ourselves to the centers of excellence. A good example is, are you going to invest in wafer technology? Are you going to get more companies to come and invest in chip testing here? Where is that you're going to focus? I think that's very important. This is the right time to invest in centers of excellence, in my view.
We'll take a short break here at Hyde Park. Do stay with us. Welcome back. We were talking about human capital, but the focus on human capital right now is increasing. But at the same time, with the pandemic and especially Sri Lanka's situation, we're talking about restrictions in terms of how we operate or engage in our daily lives. A lockdown, and then we're talking about restricted lockdown going forward. What is your personal view about an economy and a restriction in terms of quarantine curfew or other restrictions taken in order to curb the effects of a pandemic?
So the effects of pandemic probably has been very bad for certain sectors where people need to come to work. Fortunately for IT, it has been a boon because during the last 2 years of pandemic, IT has risen above what I would call otherwise as the normal ways of working. Suddenly we got the best platforms, we started to bring in the right tech products from the safety and security of data and privacy. So a lot of new apps started coming into the system, and suddenly IT, everyone said we can work from home. So which means that the technology, most of the innovations around the technology has kicked in the last 18 months. So for IT, this was a great inflection point for investing in the right kind of skills, building the right kind of technology. And that's why you'll find that there is a talent war too. Everywhere we are pushing, whether starting from the US to Australia, every continent, there is a war to get the right kind of tech people, including Sri Lanka, into our companies. So that's going to continue for the next 3 or 4 years, because for all the new products that we have come up with, we need people to build, to enhance, and also to service in the coming years. So having said on the tech part, I think the work from home, whoever has been in IT, I think they're also getting tired. Nobody wants to, we are all competing for space at home to work, right? And you just want the kids to shut up while you're working, while the kids have their tuitions and they want to learn. So I think people are getting a little tired, and that's why in the West, most of them have started coming back to work. Even in India, we have started. But for the other, starting from the retailing to the manufacturing, I think all of us have taken a hit. And I sincerely pray that people can come back into the new norm soon, post-vaccines.
Right. You're admired for your unique leadership coaching skills, but we come back to talking about the new normal here and how the IT BPM industry has embraced it. But at the same time, you talk about challenges. We know about the psychological challenges we face staying at home and working at the same time while juggling with work at home, the demands of your work, your career. But when we manage human capital and also want our employees to adjust to this new normal, how do you think we also strike a balance in making sure that we give space and not ignore the psychological challenges that an employee may face?
Though all of us may sit here and say the productivity levels of people have gone up because they work from home, in my view, I think we have reached a saturation point. People coping skills are gradually gradually on the decline. I think we had a common enemy called Corona, so the humankind rose up and they said, okay, we'll just crack whatever the problem is and we'll keep our life going. I think the coping skills is on the declining mode, for which I do believe there's the new profession called counseling and the barefoot counselors, which are going to really kick in the coming years. People do need somebody to talk to. People want to come back and start seeing faces. So we have lost all the water cooler conversations, our social conversations, which are much needed for a human to experience every day and grow, right? So how much ever you may talk about being a good coach, being a good mentor, being a good supervisor, all the goodness have been done virtually and all about work. We've never had conversations like this. So I have a good feeling that slowly people would want to break and come back, and in fact some of them have to be taught how to get back to social conversations.
Does this mean at corporate level, at businesses, there should be focus on counseling? And from an HR perspective, human resources personnel should focus more on mental and psychological development of employees rather than focusing on productivity now?
In fact, the human resources should be taught with new skills. So they're not going to manage people, they're going to manage minds now. Because when people come back, the grievances and the kind of issues that are going to crop up are going to be very different from what it was earlier.
We were talking about the budget here. You were speaking about expectations, incentives. We're talking about massive developments here, investments in our parts of certain parts of the country. You did mention that Colombo is the focus area of your venture. But I'd like to talk about new developments that the investment is expected to bring to Sri Lanka, especially in terms of products and services that will be innovated within Sri Lanka, whether there is focus, whether talent that you absorb from Sri Lanka have the opportunity to engage in new product development, new innovations within the country as part of your venture.
We've been here for the last 1 year, and there are a lot of discoveries. I would say we are still in the discovery phase as to what the country can give from the talent perspective. I would say there's a combination of people who can do the regular coding and people who can also move into innovation. So currently the kind of projects that HCL is bringing is largely on the overall coding environment, which is the software project management, and we have not really come into the product part yet. But of course, we will also venture into it, but it will be a little incremental because when we have to go more into the product, we also need to know how to scale. For that, I need the right talent.
The information technology industry, the outlook, budgets focusing on developing the industry, attracting more investments. We know that Sri Lanka targets a growth of 5% at the end of this year, but we have had massive challenges as a result of the pandemic, and we did have a double blow on the tourism industry after the Easter tax and now a pandemic hitting one of our key remittances. But Forex reserves is a massive focus for the country. Does this mean that the climate within the country for investments are favorable for investments such as yours and other big businesses to come into the country? And what kind of a push do you see for the Forex market, for reserves going forward for the country?
So there are two parts to this. While we are also saying that we are facing economic crisis and there are Forex related issues happening in the country, on the other end we also see bright news saying that there are investments coming in here as well, and I see that Sri Lanka is able to generate new customers, new investments, not only from the Asia Pacific region but the Europe region as well. So there is good news happening on that end as well. But if the government and other stakeholders believe that the current economic crisis is only temporary, and there are strategies to manage this temporary crisis that we have today, I strongly think that there must be better PR about the whole positioning of Sri Lanka, and the concerned stakeholders actually coming up and saying what's happening and what is that we are going to do to turn around. That will give a lot more faith among the investors to say, okay, this is temporary, this is what's happening in Sri Lanka, and our investments are good to go, and we are here for good. There are certain.
Does that mean marketing and PR is not the strongest?
Yep, absolutely. Because there were certain words like emergencies, the emergency bill, the food emergency. That leaves a very different connotation with people who don't live here, right? And I think that is something that has to be taken care of, because the term emergency bill has very different connotation in each country. Unless that's explained well, most of the people don't read beyond the newspaper headlines. So the headlines have to be appropriate, have to be relevant, have to say the right messaging, in my view.
We see international media focusing on Sri Lanka's crisis here. Yes, but what you mean is our response mechanism should be stronger within the country as a government, that the PR and marketing initiative should be stronger. But in terms of understanding the feasibility and viability of your industries here, what key factors did you focus on as HCL?
For us, in IT, it is all about remote working, right, at the moment. So people work, and we have the right kind of systems to bring trust and transparency with the customers, starting from the work that we deliver to the kind of billing that we do for the employees. So all these mechanisms are very matured. We have a very matured process, governance frameworks that are already set in place. So HCL did not face any challenges, and we do not face such challenges at this point in time. However, when there are certain things around the food crisis and the inflation going up, that's going to impact the employees who are working with us. So, and that is where I was saying that some of the proactive measures that the government puts, and if we know, then we will be in a better position to support our employees.
Does that mean there are any concerns about the current situation of Sri Lanka or the current the climate created by the pandemic and the lockdown that may affect or constrain operations of HCL?
Honestly, no. We do not have any concerns. In fact, I think what we had planned and what we had forecasted in terms of growth is happening well at this point in time. We also have a strategy as to how we are going to build talent. If the gates are not open and the international travel will still be affected by pandemic. Pandemic is not something that you and I can control. And I think resilient organization should know how to grow with limited resources and constraints, right? So that's why people like me have been groomed by HCL to manage these things. So
thank you very much for your time. That's all the time we have here, Srimathi. I must say we're very proud. Are part of the region, a corporate leader, a woman IT business person. It's amazing to go through your profile. You've been awarded by the Wall Street Journal for the business turnaround category, a jury drawn from Fortune 100 companies, and also a distinguished alumna award of the top 10 engineering schools in India. And the list goes on. Thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you here in Sri Lanka more often.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for all these interesting questions in the conversations.
We had with us Srimathi Shivashankar, Corporate Vice President of HCL Technologies, an IT giant venturing globally, and of course began operations here in Sri Lanka in September 2020. Thank you for joining us here at Hyde Park.
Thank you.